Hello everybody, Shinjo here, and welcome back to the channel. The term cross-generation, specifically in Pokemon, is when a Pokemon has an introduction in one generation and then gets some form of add-on later. This could be in the form of a pre-evolution for the sake of Pikachu from Pichu, or a Mega Evolution for a mod like Mawile being introduced in Gen 3 and then getting a Mega Evolution in Gen 6. But in today's video, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite cross-generation evolutions. Generation 4 primarily has the largest amount of all, but that doesn't mean the other generations are slouches as well. Just recently, we have an evolution for Girafarig and Stantler in the most recent Pokemon games. Even though Sinnoh popularized the idea of taking a mon that's, kinda trash, and make it somewhat good. Now, that's not to say that these pre-evolutions aren't exactly bad. Some of them are still usable to this day. But for the most part, the pre-evolutions don't have as good of base stats as opposed to the final evolutions. For the most part, evolutions do give buffed base stats. And even better designs that were added on to a concept that was already introduced. But I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get into this. Barely scraping by on this list is the Dunsparce. I know there's so much discourse online about how people do not like the Dunsparce because he's just Dunsparce but bigger. And to be fair, if you're going to make the argument for that, you can make the same argument for Palmo's evolutions, but we're not talking about Palmo here. Honestly, Dunsparce was a unique Pokemon in general from the start, and the fact that it's a mon that's based off of a mythological creature that a lot of people in America might not even know. It's a unique design, and unfortunately it doesn't get a new type, a new ability. It gets a new move, which is something, and to be quite honest, I don't know how good it actually is in competitive, because Serene Grace with high crits, flinching, freezing, whatever you want, I can imagine that it's good, but a lot of people don't like the design, but that's not going to stop me from putting it on my list. Number 9 is King Gambit. I was singing this guy's praises when I was making my tier list a while back, and I do still think it's a good mon. I just can't get over the fact that it hops around on his hair for one thing. I know that a lot of mons look goofy, but for a mon like Bisharp that's supposed to be menacing, that does take away from it a little bit. Plus, from what I can imagine with competitive, you send King Gambit out at the very end of the battle because his ability relies on him being the last mon. And that's good, but it's also kind of bad because it makes him a one-trick Shogun. But as a design, it really looks cool. There are just those minor things that I have complaints with. Number 8 is Gliscor. Now, you're probably going to see this a lot with a lot of videos I make in general, and mainly this one. A lot of my list is influenced by the anime. Ash had a Gliscor, so it was already going to be high up on the list. And Gliscor as a mon in the game is really cool. I personally like how it looks in Legends Arceus better, because in especially Diamond and Pearl, his design does look kind of weird, the sprite form at least. Platinum, they fixed it a little bit, but I just like Gliscor's whole vibe as a whole. The unfortunate part, I never really cared much for Gligar. Like, it was definitely a mon that I knew of. A lot of these mons that were involved in cross-generation evolutions, a lot of people might not have even given them the time of day until they got an evolution. And Gligar, I just didn't really care one way or the other about Gligar until he got this evolution. I just really like the design, and it's really cool and wicked. Definitely menacing if you see it in a dark alley. Number 7 is Electivire. Like I just said, the anime plays a huge part in me liking Pokemon. And Paul's Electivire is really cool. I like the whole dynamic that it had with Ash's Pikachu, and especially Ash's Infernape. And unlike Gliscor, Electivire was a mon that I really like, but Electabuzz was really cool as well. That episode back in the original series where he was at odds with a Scyther was really cool. But Electivire is just a really cool mon. I can imagine there are some people that don't like the design of this mon. You could say that about a lot of mons. But just the backstory that I have with it and how I really liked Electabuzz from the start is just all around a really solid mon. Number 6 is Gallade. Yeah, he barely scrapes by from being a cross-generation mon, but it still counts. I personally was never really on the Gardevoir hype train. I know there are a lot of people that always got a routes early on in Hoenn, evolved it into Gardevoir because it's a powerful psychic type and later a fairy type, but I just never really cared that much. Gallade, on the other hand, is a really cool mon. Obviously, I really like fighting types, and the fact that it's in a group of mons that are psychic and fighting type next to Medicham is really cool. His Mega Evolution, the joke of him being Seto Kaiba is a little bit overdone, but I do still appreciate it. Gallade's just a really solid mon. Number 5 is Ambipom. So this is definitely an oddball pick compared to what I've had so far. We've had mons like Gliscor and even King Gambit that are really powerful and menacing. But then we have Ambipom. And yeah, Ambipom is definitely not the most menacing mon out there. But I really like Apom. I liked when Ash caught his at the very end of Hoenn. That was back before I even knew that it had an evolution. Just from me alone that really likes monkeys as an animal, really likes Ambipom. And that's really the only reason. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Number 4 is Yanmega. And Yanmega is another one that adds to the line of obscure Pokemon that very few people like. Apom and Yanma were both introduced in Johto. They both got evolutions. But the reason that I put Yanmega above is, first of all, the design. I really like the design. Second of all, I know I've told this story a million times so far, at least it feels like it to me. I've constantly searched in that grass patch above Goldenrod, and I distinctly remember finding a Yanma there. I don't know if you can actually find him there. My memory might be a bit fuzzy on that. But I remember finding a Yanma there, or at least a Yanma somewhere. And of course in Gen 2, Pokemon can flee, so it was just a race to try and get a Yanma. And of course, after you get your Yanma, after teaching to get Ancient Power, which is a funny move considering it's quad weak to it, you get this monster. I really like this thing. Not a big fan of how they kept it bug and flying, but it's fine anyway because with terrestrialization in the recent gens, that's not that big of a problem in a gen that Yanmega isn't in. Yeah, whatever. Number 3 is Honchkrow. We're continuing on the Johto hype train with Honchkrow. I really like this design. I like how it has the mob boss outfit now, considering the Murkrow had a witch's hat is kind of tying in because they both wear hats. And Honchkrow is just a really solid mon. I like how Giovanni gets one post Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But unfortunately, it's only at 3 because while I like the design, anytime that anybody mentions anything about it, I just say, yeah, that's a cool mon. It's a solid mon overall, but just don't really get that many opportunities or even feel compelled to use it. Number 2 is Annihilate. Full transparency, I was gonna put this at number 1, but I figured that that would be recency bias with the new games, so number 2 is where it's at. I really like Primeape. Again, a mon that was basically irrelevant up until the evolution, which is a case for a lot of cross-generation mons. And unlike mons like Yanmega or Murkrow that don't get a new type or change types when they evolve, Primeape changes from a pure fighting type to a ghost fighting type. And considering its Pokédex entries, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. It was even to the point where I added this thing to my team in Scarlet, even though I already had a ghost type with Skeledirge. That's how much I wanted to use this thing. Number 1 is Scizor. I know, I'm as surprised as you are that a Sinnoh Pokemon didn't make the top of the list. And I'm the one that made the list. There's not really much that can be said. I was looking through the list of cross-generation evolutions, and I wrote down the ones that I wanted to include, and as I was thinning out the list, I realized Scizor's a really solid Mon. Much like Primeape to Annihilape, Scyther changed from Bug Flying to Bug Steel. And while that's not really the best type defensively, it's still a really cool Mon and a really cool type to introduce the newly added Steel type. Unfortunately, nobody in Johto uses it, but after that, Scizor is just a staple of bug types. When people think of good bug types, I can imagine that Mons like Volcarona and Scizor come to mind. Even Heracross to an extent, which was also introduced in Johto. Scizor is just a really solid Mon, and the red and black color scheme is really cool. And I vaguely remember, chalk this up to the list of useless Pokemon facts that I know, I always remember that Scizor pretends to have 3 heads because of its actual face and its 2 claws that play tricks on people. Don't know why I remember that among everything else, but I do. But overall, Scizor is just a really solid Mon. Even in Legends Arceus, considering that you don't have to trade to get this thing, kinda tempted to use one. Kinda tempted to replay over it again and get a Scizor. He's just that good of a Mon. And he's remained relevant throughout all of these years. Ignition Bullet Punch being the bread and butter of Scizor movesets. And especially his Mega Evolution and the rise of Fairy types, meaning that Steel types are even more vital now. Scizor is just a really all-around good Mon. You can't tell me that this thing wouldn't at least make your top 5. So that's my list of my top 10 cross-generational Pokemon evolutions. Let me know what your favorites are down in the comment section, and I'll see you next time. Momentai.